So, last class we covered the different types of generating the delays, and already I have told you how delays are important for the microprocessor and microcontroller systems. Everywhere we need the delay, and that can be implemented as a subroutine. Okay. So, we can use delay as a subroutine, and whenever we need the delay we can call in our main program, isn't it? That is what we saw. And if we need less delay, we have to use single registers, and if you want more delay, then you can use the multiple registers, and you can go for single loop, multiple loop, nested loop. And we saw also different types of subroutines, isn't it? There are three ways, I think. One is you can call the subroutine once and continue with your main program, or you can call the subroutine many number of times, and you can return also many number of times. So, likewise, depending upon the application requirement, you have to use the subroutines or whatever you call procedures and functions. And the mechanism to implement the subroutine is something different from the high level language. In high level language, what we do? We write the name of the subroutine or name of the function, and wherever that name appears, the subroutine is called. Isn't it? And we have call by reference, call by value, call by name. The three way you can pass the parameters in the high level language, but here only two things can be implemented, that is call by value and call by reference. So, how to implement call by value? Simply exchange the value of registers or memory locations, right? And call by reference means you have to call by the memory address by which you can access the content of memory, and whenever the set of registers are exhaustively used, you can make use of the stack. And theoretical, as I told you, there is no limit in defining the stack size until your programmable area is covered, until the programmable part of the memory is completely used, right. So, that is the limitation of the stack. Otherwise, there is no theoretical, there is no limit, but practically it should be limited by few locations, because some locations are reserved for the system routine like BIOS, post, and some other system routines like interrupt service routines, right. For every interrupt, there is a corresponding interrupt service routine. Interrupt service routine is almost similar to your subroutine, except that the interrupt service routines are usually stored in the reserved memory locations, and you do not have to call the interrupt service routines. The moment interrupt comes, the interrupt service routine will be automatically called by the microprocessor and it will be executed. And most of the system calls in the operating system, they are basically the interrupt service routines, right. And whenever any problem happens in execute your program or a software in a computer system, the interrupts will be automatically generated and the corresponding system calls or interrupt service routines will be executed. Okay. So, that is how we can link the operating system routines, which are usually defined in the kernel of the operating system. You know that the operating system is divided in two parts, one is the kernel part, another is the user space. So, only you are allowed to access the user space, not the kernel space, and a kernel space defines all the set of interrupt service routines, and which are basically mainly used for the protection of the resources. What are the resources? The set of registers and the set of flags and the what you call the set of IO devices. Anything you want to authenticate or to implement some security mechanism, the hardware security. So, for that you can use the system calls, and this set of system calls constitute the kernel of the operating system, right. So, there is a relation between, even if you see in the advanced microprocessors, many system calls are directly implementable by the advanced microprocessors, okay, in the form of interrupt service routines. So, there is a similarity between the interrupt service routine and your subroutine and macros, because their three terms are very much similar to each other, but there is also difference. Macros are also extensively used for the assembly language routines. We will discuss, because in 8085 there is no macros available. But in 8086 we shall see how macros will be useful for the programmer while writing the programs. Okay. So, macros are also called open subroutines because they will not return the result, they will return the text. Okay. So, open subroutines. And what are the closed subroutines? Closed subroutines are usually called the written by the programmer, which are the subroutines or functions or procedures used in your assembly language program. And interrupt service routines are something similar to subroutine, but they are usually implemented for the system functions or system routines. Am I clear? So, the three types of routines we use. One is system routines, they are the interrupt service routines, and another is a set of subroutines which are used by the programmer, and macros which are similar to subroutine, but their mechanism, the way they are used and their importance are completely different, right. And we shall see macros particularly with respect to 8086. Okay. So, already I have told you what are the important registers available in 8086, and since it is a chip, so it is also having 20 pins in the left side and 20 pins in the right side. So, there are in fact there are 20 different signals in the left side and 20 signals in the right side, and all these signals are categorized into three types. One is address bus or address signals, second is data signals, and third are the control signals, right. And address signals, as you say, that always the address bus is unidirectional from microprocessor to memory or I/O devices. So, these address signals can be used to locate a memory location if it is a memory, or to locate an input or output device if it is I/O devices, right. That is the only use for I/O, and always it is generated by the microprocessor to locate a device. Therefore, it is unidirectional. And AD0 to AD15, this time we have 16-bit data bus. You can see AD0 to AD15, I have used here AD0 to AD15, that is 16-bit data bus. Here each memory location can be of 2 bytes, and I can access 1 byte at a time, or even I can access 2 bytes. But we have seen in 8085, at a time you have to access only 1 byte. But there is a provision in 8086, we can access 2 bytes of 2 locations of 16 bits at a time, or using the 16-bit data bus, it is possible to transfer a 16-bit data from memory to microprocessor and microprocessor to memory. Therefore, it is bidirectional. So, data bus is always bidirectional, and A0 to A15 is multiplexed with D0 to D15. In 8085, what we do? A0 to A7 is multiplexed with D0 to D7 because of the 8 data lines, but here it supports 16 data lines, and number of address lines are 20. So, AD0 to AD15 is called the multiplexed address data bus because address and data both are multiplexed, and again the demultiplexing happens to identify whether at a particular point of time the bus is containing address or data, right. Then remaining 4 lines, that is A16 to A19, that is exclusively used for the address, but they are also multiplexed with the status signals, and that means almost all 20 lines are multiplexed with either data signals or the status signals. And what is the use of status signals we will come to know whenever you study the entire microprocessor 8086. So, this is about the address bus and data bus. Next question comes the control bus. So, before going to the control bus, let us look what is inside the microprocessor 8086. So, you can see that these registers we have discussed in the last class, that all registers are of 8 bits, and you can combine H with L to make it X. Again it will serve as the accumulator, though it is serving in 8085, that will serve as an accumulator. Similarly, we have BH, BL, which if you want to access 16-bit register in the form of 16-bit register, then you have to name it BX. So, while writing the assembly language program, you should be very careful whether you should write BH or BL or BX. The moment you write BX, that means you are trying to refer 16-bit data which is present in the register BX, and whenever you want to access 8-bit data, you can use BH or BL. Am I clear? Okay. Similarly, CX indicates CH and CL, DX, DH, DL. That last class we discussed very clearly how to access 8-bit data and how to access 16-bit data. Only the name is changed, right? There are some 16-bit registers like special purpose. These are all these four are the general purpose registers, and these are the special purpose: base pointer, destination index, source index, and stack pointer. That we discussed in the last class. And the right side, if you see, there are segment registers. CA stands for code segment, EA stands for extra segment, and SS stands for stack segment, DA stands for data segment, and IP stands for IP stands for instruction pointer, which is something similar to program counter in 8085, because it is the instruction pointer register which will hold the address of the next instruction to be executed, and it is the register responsible for sequencing the control of execution. So, after executing one instruction, which instruction will be executed, that will be pointed by the IP. It is just like a PC. So, different microprocessors just have given their different names. Even some of the microprocessors like IBM 360, they call it is location counter. So, functionally all are same, only the names are changed, right. Similarly, if you go for other microprocessors, Motorola series, they may be calling instruction counter, instruction pointer, location counter, and program counter. All are having the same purpose. That is, always will hold the address of the next instruction to be executed, right. So, these are called therefore, these four registers are called the segment registers, and we shall more discuss about the segment registers while generating the actual address, because the physical address is 20 bits, but this register will hold only 16 bits. So, by using this 16 bit, we can generate a 20-bit address, and as the name signifies, CA stands for code segment, therefore, it will store only the code or the program part, right. And data segment DS, always the data portion. For example, you are writing a program for finding the largest or smallest numbers out of 10 numbers. So, what is the input to your program? 10 numbers, and what will be output to program? The largest number among 10 and smallest among 10. So, similarly, here whenever you write the program will occupy in the code segment, and the data which is used by that program will occupy the data segment. And if at all you are using any stack in your program, then that will occupy the stack segment. And sometimes what happens, the data segment may not be sufficient to store a huge amount of data. You can use the ES or extra segment. So, this indicates that there is no difference between DS and ES. Only when the overflow occurs, that data segment is not capable of keeping all the data items, so we can go for the extra segment. So, data segment and extra segment, almost the purpose is same, to store the data, and the stack purpose is very clear, and the code segment purpose is very clear. But because of this 16-bit register, we will see that maximum the capacity of a segment will be 64 kilobytes, because in 8085 we have seen, because of the 16-bit address bus, the total capacity is 64 kilobytes. We cannot go beyond that. So, that means the entire capacity of the 8085 memory system is same as a segment capacity of 8086, and maximum there are 4 segments. So, if you multiply into 4, so you will get exactly 1 megabyte, right. So, 64 kilobyte is the maximum size of the segment, and the moment your program even exceeds 64 kilobyte, so even it is not possible to extend the program. But fortunately, most of the programs which you run on 8086 systems, and 64 kilobyte is enough as far as the industrial applications is concerned. But as far as the generalized application is concerned, for example, you want to develop an employee information system or student information system, perhaps this 64 kilobyte is not sufficient, and that is the reason why this 8086 could not be used as a microprocessor for the general purpose systems. So, this is not used as a microprocessor for general purpose computer. So, rather this is used for industrial applications where the application programs are very much limited in size. But now we have the memory system or microprocessor system which supports the data and program area in terms of gigabyte. Therefore, they are microprocessors for the general purpose or general purpose computing facilities. Is it clear? So, anyway, so these are the segment register and instruction pointer is used to hold the address of the next instruction to be executed. So, we shall see that how the segment register and instruction point register can be combined together to generate a 20-bit address, and which is the real physical address of the memory location. Okay. Similarly, these code segment registers can be combined with all these general purpose registers and special purpose registers to generate a 20-bit address. Okay. So, the way we generate a 20-bit physical address by using the segment register, by using the pointer register, that is instruction pointer or base pointer, or index register like source index and destination index, or stack pointer or general purpose register, is known as the addressing modes of 8086. Now, the slightly we change the definition of addressing modes with respect to 8086. Am I clear? So, the way we generate a 20-bit physical address from 16-bit segment registers, 16-bit general purpose registers and 16-bit pointer registers, 16-bit index registers, because they are the only registers. Okay, we can list down. One is segment registers, then we have pointer registers, 3 is GPRS, that is general purpose registers, and 4th is index registers, or we can also categorize like this. So, the entire set of registers of 8086 can be categorized into two types. One is general purpose registers, another is special purpose registers. Under the special purpose registers, they are further classified into segment registers, pointer registers and index registers. Is it okay? I think this is clear. Okay. So, now whenever you find the 20-bit physical address, now we can have the permutation and combination of this, and this permutation and combination of these general purpose registers and special purpose registers is known as the addressing modes. The way we generate this 20-bit physical address using these registers, right. So, we shall see how the number of addressing modes, there are 8 addressing modes, are based upon the combination or pairing of these different types of registers, and the most complex addressing mode will involve all these registers. Am I clear? And most simplest addressing mode will cover only segment registers and pointer registers. Segment register is most common. Without segment register, you cannot generate a 20-bit address. And the most complex addressing mode, we shall see that to find a 20-bit address, we can involve each and every registers, including GPRS as well as the SPRS. Again, the question comes, why to make the addressing mode so much complex? What is the advantage? So, one way complexity means it is a disadvantage, but what is the advantage of this? We shall see that even though you are trying to make the addressing mode complex, a lot of benefits will come from this in terms of saving the memory, either saving the memory or saving the time, because our goal is to reduce the time complexity and the space complexity. Therefore, there is a trade off in choosing the addressing mode and choosing the complexity. So, unless we compromise on the addressing modes or unless we make the addressing mode complex, we cannot achieve an efficient program or efficient execution. And this trade off is balanced, or this is the first time we are trying to balance the trade off in 8086 microprocessor or in the entire microprocessor scenario, and this trade off was not that important for 8085. Am I clear? So, intentionally we have made the addressing modes complex, and you can imagine the latest microprocessor, which is Titanium series of microprocessors or Pentium series of microprocessors 586 onwards, supports 128 addressing modes, at least 128 addressing modes. So, we saw 4 addressing modes in 8085, but now we are observing there are 8 addressing modes, and each of the addressing modes we shall discuss in the class, because that is very, very important. And unless you understand the addressing modes, you cannot write the program in 8086, because it is not as simple as 8085. Is it okay? So, from this we understand that a set of registers which are available and which are limited in nature should be judiciously used in your program, right? Because there are very limited number of registers, but the requirement of storage is huge whenever you write a big program. So, apart from these registers, we have a small buffer, only 6 bytes buffer, that is called IQ, or we call the instruction queue. And this part of the program particularly, this part of the microprocessor is known as bus interface unit, and this part of the microprocessor is called execution unit. And bus interface unit is attached towards the memory, and execution unit is the core of the microprocessor, right? So, what is the task of bus interface unit? Its job is to fetch the instruction or data from memory and forward this to the ALU for execution, right. So, the execution part will be taken care by the EU, and both fetch operation and execute operation are taking place simultaneously, because both the units are available inside 8086. So, this is how we can achieve the pipelining. What is pipelining? Overlapped instruction parallelism, that while one instruction is being fetched, another instruction can be executed, and this is how we can get at most 2 times faster. If we are executing a program with suppose 2 units of time, we can perhaps execute within 1 unit of time because of 2-phase pipelining. So, anyway, so this part is the bus interface unit, and this 6 bytes queue will fetch 6 bytes of instructions in advance and store it. Then this is the ALU, which will take all the arithmetic and logical operations. So, though comparison operations are implicit here, you will assume that along with arithmetic and logical operations, we can also do the comparison operations. So, what are the operations? We have the addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and we have direct instruction for each of these, except the exponentiation. We do not have direct instruction exponentiation. For example, you want to find 2 to the power 3, it is not possible directly by 8086. There is no exponential function, right? But there is a add instruction, divide instruction, multiplication instruction, and division instruction. And this multiplication and division instructions are missing in 8085. For multiplication, we are doing the successive addition, and for division, we are doing the successive subtraction. Is it okay? So, this plus, minus, multiplication, division, we have the direct instructions. So, there is no problem. But there is a provision in 8086, it is possible to perform trigonometric functions like tangent, sine function, cosine functions, and exponential function, not by 8086. There is a coprocessor, it will do only highly complex computational task, and that processor name is 8087. So, 8087 is named as math coprocessor, and it is almost like 8086. It is again a 40-pin IC, and it will also have ALU, but it will only perform only computational tasks. What computational tasks? The complex calculations, and it is having own instruction sets, and these instruction sets, whenever programmer writes in his program, it is the job of 8087 will recognize those instructions. If you are writing the instruction for 8087, and if you are writing the instruction for 8086, 8086 will be interpreting what is the meaning of this instruction, and this 8086 and 8087 will work parallelly. For example, you are writing a program where there are some computational instructions and there are some data transfer instructions. So, data transfer operations will be done by 8086, but computational instructions will be picked up, that too not all computational functions which are computational intensive like tangential functions or your what do you call the exponential functions, and we shall see, we will list down what are the exhaustive list of computational tasks that 8087 can perform. And if you go for advanced microprocessors, they can directly execute a subroutine. So, for example, you want to sort hundreds of numbers, and the sorting number is available as a routine, just you have to write the program instruction SORT. If as you go towards the advanced microprocessors, many system routines are available in the form of libraries or the functions like your Arduino and Admel and what you call Raspberry Pi, etc. So that is the trend. So we are trying to implement many things in hardware, but while accessing, we are trying to access by name instead of writing the program for small things. So for exponential, even it is not it is almost impossible in 8085, but in 8086 if you have the 8087 coprocessor, because it is optional, you may have or may not have. Without 8087 also your microprocessor will run the program, but if you use 8087, the program execution will be faster, because 8087 will pick up all the computational intensive tasks. Is it okay? So, and this 8087 IC you can see in 8086 kit, microprocessor kit, it is just near to the 8086. They are directly connected, and how they are connected we shall see in other classes. So, pin wise they can be parallelly connected. They can utilize a common set of address and data bus and control bus. So, bus will be shared among these two devices. Even it is possible to have more than one coprocessor. And how it is possible, we shall see whenever we will see interfacing part. The different peripheral ICs will be interfaced with both 8085 and 8086. Even some of the peripheral ICs are there, they are compatible to both 8085 as well as 8086 with a little bit change in the configuration. If you change the configuration, it will be adaptable to 805, and if you change for another configuration, it will be adaptable to 8086. Is it okay? So, anyway, but still then 8087 is called math coprocessor, and which is optional. Without this also a microprocessor will run the program. Okay. So, from this indicates that we can have several peripheral processors along with 8087. 8086 is common. In addition to that, we can use several ICs or several peripheral processors. Is it okay? Now coming to the last unit, and flags already we have discussed, that is OF overflow flag, DF stands for direction flag, IF interrupt flag, TF trap flag, S flag, Z flag, A flag, P flag, C flag are same thing, same as 8085. Only these 4 flags are extra, and how they are useful, that whenever you write the program, automatically you will understand how these flags are utilized. Okay. So, now coming to the last unit of the 8086 architecture, that is control and timing unit, which is also vital. So, as I already have told you, every microprocessor must have a clock. The way we are doing our duty using a watch or clock, in the same way each and every activity in a microprocessor should be done by a clock, and this clock frequency will decide the speed of the microprocessor. And what is the clock frequency of 8086? Can anybody tell what is the clock frequency of 8086? 6 megahertz. Then what will be the time period? 1 by 6 microsecond. 1 by 6 means 0.13 something. Okay, so if you divide by 10 by 6 or 1 by 6, you will get the in terms of microsecond. So this is also operating in microsecond. 8085 was working in microsecond, this is also microsecond. I think if you go from 386 onwards, then there will be a chance that you will get in terms of gigahertz, and you will get the time period in terms of nanosecond. So anyway, whatever may be the clock period, there are number of clock periods fixed for performing some task. For example, for opcode fetch, at least we need 3 clock pulses for every machine cycle, and the way we have defined that rule 4 plus 3 plus 3. First byte fetching will take always 4, subsequent will take 3, but this will be obeyed by 90% of the instruction in 8085. Similarly, we will have a rule set for 8086, that we shall see whenever I will draw the timing diagram for the instructions. So anyway, so the control unit, you can see most of the signals whatever we have discussed in 8085 are something similar. Hold acknowledgement for the DMA operation, direct memory access control operation, and the corresponding IC which will take care of this hold and hold acknowledgement signal is 8237 or 8257 DMA controller. And fortunately, the same 8237 or 57 is compatible to both 8085 as well as 8086, right. And of course, it is also compatible to 286 up to 386. But from 486 and 586 onwards, the surface mounted technology came, where all the peripheral ICs were including the microprocessor IC, they were integrated into a single IC. So, here we are able to distinguish, this is the microprocessor IC, this is the peripheral IC, and this is the memory IC, or this is the IO interface IC. But if you see the latest microprocessor, everything is integrated to a single chip, just like a microcontroller. So, we shall see what is a microcontroller. How we can see that whatever we are discussing independently, they are all merged together into a single chip we call a microcontroller, or the advanced microprocessor systems uses the surface mounted technology, where the RAM, IO, all peripheral ICs and microprocessor ICs all are integrated into the single chip. Okay. So, anyway, that is that you may be interested for, if those who are interested, they can go for advanced microprocessor. Mostly it is an elective in final year somewhere. Okay. So, here we have to restrict to 8086 and we will go for the microcontroller. So, anyway, so I do not have to explain much about hold and hold acknowledgement, and assume that in 8237 DMA controller, there must be at least 2 pins. One pin is output hold pin, which will be input to 8086. You can see from this arrow mark, this hold signal is input to the 8086, and this same hold signal will be output from 8237 or DMA controller. And if a device wants the direct memory access data transfer, he wants to make use of the DMA controller, first he will request to DMA controller, then DMA controller will put a request to microprocessor, and if the microprocessor grants this request, then it will send the acknowledgement signal to DMA controller, then DMA controller will send the acknowledgement signal to the user or the device which has requested the service of DMA. And once this cycle is completed, the direct data transfer will begin. And how to program this? What are the set of instructions to be used for accessing the DMA controller, that we shall see during the interfacing 8237 with 8086 or 8237 with 8085. Okay. So, anyway, so hold acknowledgement is over. Similarly, the hold acknowledgement is an output signal for giving acknowledgement to the DMA controller that your request is granted, right. So, therefore, this hold acknowledgement signal which is output in 8086, that will be an input signal to 8237. Am I clear? Then 8237 will give an acknowledgement signal to the device. So, the exact sequence of operation we can monitor using set of instructions, and there are some few general purpose instructions will be used, and there are some special instructions made for the DMA controller. So, anyway, so then this request and grant bar, these are the coprocessor signals. As I told you, a request, suppose a device or a program wants to use the 8087, then it will enable the signal using request bar, and if 8086 is interested to give the control over the bus to this device, then it will grant the request by enabling GT bar. GT bar grant request. Okay. And then ready signal. So, ready signal is used for synchronization process, same as 8085. Okay. Then reset is also same thing. It is just like your, if you are pressing reset switch in personal computer, it is same as the reset switch in 8086. Okay. Then minimum and maximum mode. Yes, this in a unique signal available in 8086, but this was not available in 8085. So, what is the difference, or what is the extra benefit we are getting from minimum and maximum mode? See, whenever the 8086 operates in minimum mode, there are two things happens. One thing, that 8087 is missing. As I told you, 8087 is optional. You may use or may not use. So, if it is working in minimum mode, that means we are not making use of 8087. And if it is in maximum mode, that means you are using 8087. That is one feature of the minimum maximum mode. And another thing, if you are using maximum mode, you have to use an extra bus controller, and that bus controller is 8288. So 8288 is a bus controller which is used only in the maximum mode, and if you are not using 8087, so then microprocessor 8086 is operating at a minimum mode. And how to configure 8086 in minimum mode and in maximum mode, that we shall see when we write the program for execution in 8086. So anyway, and QS0 to QS1, this is used for the queue status, because we have an instruction queue. What is there in the content in the queue, whether queue is empty or queue is full or queue is holding some data or instruction, that can be reflected from these signals QS0 to QS1. They are called queue status signals, because these are the only signals by which we can know the status of internal states of the microprocessor, or internal states of the microprocessor can only be monitored by these signals, and these signals can be accessed using the microprocessor instructions, right. So then what is remaining? The last one is the ground or VCC. VCC, that means every IC needs a power supply. So therefore, at least there must be two pins, one is for positive, another is for negative, and almost all microprocessor ICs in the world are operated with a plus 5 volt DC, unless you add some mechanical components, because most of the electronics components in the world are operating within plus 5 or minus 5 volt DC. But if you want to use some electromechanical device, for example a CD-ROM, in a CD-ROM, to rotate the CD-ROM we need some mechanical force, a rotational force. So for that we need high voltage. So therefore we go for plus 12 volt DC. And if you go for more mechanical devices which are more what you call which needs more force, then you can go for plus 24 DC, plus 24 volt DC. And it is the SMPS, switching mode power supply. You can see that in every computer system there is an SMPS, switching mode power supply. It gives 4 voltage levels, plus 5, plus 12, plus 24 and a ground, and sometimes you can get multiple grounds also, right. So this is the reason why, because a computer can be used for interfacing a number of electronics devices which are purely electronics, and there are some devices which are purely mechanical, like a lathe machine in mechanical engineering. It is a purely mechanical device. You can control the lathe also using microprocessor, right. But if the mechanical device attached to a microprocessor, that is called electromechanical device. For example, a keyboard is electromechanical device, because unless I put a force on the key, so it cannot accept. Am I clear? Similarly, a printer is an electromechanical device, because initially you are giving the digital signal, but ultimately a force is required to print on the paper. Therefore, it is electromechanical. So we can categorize all the devices in the world into 3 categories. Some are purely electronics or digital, and some are electromechanical, partially electronics and partially mechanical, and some are purely mechanical. But it is good that all these devices can be controlled using microprocessor or microcontroller. Is it okay? So anyway, so therefore the power supply is also equally important, and now the time has come, you have to use power judiciously, because whenever the microprocessor is not in operation, it has to be switched to the sleep mode. And if the microprocessor is now currently active in executing certain program, then you can use in the active mode. And just like your mobile phones, if you make your mobile phone in the sleep mode, I think power consumption will be less, right. And you may be thinking that why, because the plus 5 volt DC, how much power it will consume, but why we are stressing so much on the power? So because of this activeness or active power supply to microprocessor, it is not only the consumption of power, it also generates the heat which affects the other peripheral devices inside a computer system. Therefore, you can see that there is a small fan attached to the microcomputer system. Its task is to all the time cool the ICs, and particularly in the summer season, if you see, even this 8086 and 8085 ICs, after 5 minutes of time you will see that how the heat is generated, even you cannot touch also, it is so much heated, right. So these are also equally important because of the power supply. So power is also an important criteria while designing the ICs, okay. But anyway, as far as microprocessor is concerned, plus 5 volt DC is enough. or plus 5 volt will indicate 1 and a ground 0 voltage will indicate 0, and we need only 1 and 0 at present. Then next signals is NMI, non-maskable interrupt, which we call the trap. That means whenever this interrupt comes, everything has to be suspended and the highest priority will be given to NMI. Example is UPS, because if the power goes up, nothing can be done. Similarly, we have INT. INT is general purpose interrupt. This is the initially whenever the interrupt comes, it has to come through the INT line. Then it will take a decision whether which type of interrupt service routine will be called. Anyway, we shall discuss more about interrupt whenever we go to the interrupt section. Then test is used for the checking the status of the microprocessor, whether it is performing correct or not. Anyway, test, there is a direct instruction available. By using the test instruction, or that whenever the test instruction is executed, this signal will be activated, and some of the components or the register status you can check using this test signal. And another is lock. Lock is just something like your PC lock. It is just like suppose you are locking your house, you are using a hardware lock. In the same way, it is called software lock. If you lock it, the system will not function and it will not work at all, or you cannot execute anything on the microprocessor, right. So, anyway, these signals will be useful through the instructions, and which instructions correspond to which signal, it will be clear whenever we go to the set of instructions, or we call the instruction set architecture of 8086, ISA of 8086. So, the way we see instruction set architecture of 8085, in the same way we will see ISA of 8086. As I told you, there are more than 3000 variations of instructions, and so it is clear that I cannot cover all 3000 instructions in the class. It will take the entire semester, still then some instructions may be left. So, what we can do, I can categorize the all instructions into different types, and we will see few of the instructions from each category. And if you run at least 20 average programs, good programs which are at least 10 lines of program, I think you will be acquainted with all the instruction set, the entire instructions of the 8086. As you write more number of programs, you will be familiar with more number of instructions. Am I clear? So, hardly I will take 2 or 3 classes to cover up the entire instruction set of 8086, not more than that, because the interface is remaining and 8051 microcontroller is remaining. Is it okay? So, anyway, the most important component of instruction set architecture is addressing modes. So, first of all, we should clear all 8 addressing modes supported by 8086. But to understand addressing modes, we should understand how the address is generated. Okay. So, output must be 20-bit address and input should be 16-bit. How to generate a 20-bit address from a 16-bit address, and to make it 20-bit, what type of operation you should do, and to do this operation, where to get the data and which register you should access, so that something will be added. Or you can say that this is your logical address and this is your physical address. So, physical address is a function of logical address, and this logical address can be obtained by retrieving the contents of various registers. What are the registers? General purpose, special purpose, and under special we have pointer registers, index registers and segment registers, right. And which segment registers are used for which address, that also you have to identify. It is not that all segment registers can be useful for all tasks. Every segment register is defined for its own. For example, if you want to access only instruction area in the memory, then you have to use CS. If you want to access the data area, then you have to use DS. And if you want to access the stack area, you have to use SS. And if you want to access the overflow area, then you have to access ES, right. So, this is clear that if you want to access the data area, never use CS, and if you want to access instructions from the instruction area of the microprocessor memory, then you should not access any other register except CS. CS means code segment, Am I clear? So these restrictions, because I have seen that always there is a confusion, because whenever you write the program, we forget to mention the name of the register. Sometimes you will be accessing the instruction, but the register will be DS. You will be accessing the data, but the register will be CS. And mostly in the practical classes, when I will maintain the lab record, I have seen there are a lot of confusions. Therefore, you have to be very clear. Unlike 8085, here you have to clearly mention what type of segment registers you are taking and how they are being accessed for writing the program. And it is good that whatever the programs you have solved for 8085 are also to be solved using 8086. Is it okay? So, the list of experiments I had given for 8085 are also applicable to 8086, but you must use 8086 instructions, right? And there is a lot of similarity between 8085 instructions and 8086 instructions, but still the syntactically they are different. And we are more bothered about syntax and semantics both for 8085 and 8086. And whenever you see in the exam also, you read the question very carefully, that if it is written for 8085, write it for 8085. Never use 8086 instruction while writing the program in 8085. We are more serious about the syntax. Though logic is important, but syntax also equally important. So, both syntax and semantics. And there is chance of confusion. Why I am telling? Because I used to cover first 8085 microprocessor, then interfacing, then I used to go to 8086. And before mid semester, I never teach this 8086. But this time we have covered 8085 and we are going to cover 8086. And while writing program, there may be confusion, because before mid semester we used to focus only on 8085 and interfacing. Am I clear? So, to avoid this confusion, what you can do, you be very careful about the instruction set, and moreover both are similar, and sometimes some instructions are very same. For example, move, MOV is there in 8085 and MOV also there in 8086, but the context, the way we use MOV, there lies the difference. Suppose in 8085 I can write move A comma B, but if you write move A comma B in 8086, it is wrong. Why? AH AL, BH BL, but if I write AL comma BL, it is okay. If I write move AH comma BH, it is okay. But so likewise, you can see many times you will get confusion, and that confusion should be avoided.